All right. It looks like it's about 10:01. If you're here for promoting your community college archives and collections, you're in the right place. I think I'll give it just one more minute because I see some folks still trickling in. So hang tight for just one other minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us this Thursday morning. If you can't hear me or see me or the screen, feel free to let me know in the chat. Welcome to Promoting Your Community College Archives. My name is Brooke Chuka. I'm an outreach specialist for the State Archives of North Carolina, and I'll be your virtual host moderator today. This is a virtual presentation organized by the Traveling Archivist Program, also known as TAP, administered by the State Archives of North Carolina. In this session, we're going to examine how to promote your archival collections in the community college environment. Thanks to 3 experts who have graciously offered to share their experiences with us. These speakers work in institutions that have very different backgrounds as far as the archives go. So one of our speakers is really the first full-time archivist at her institution, while another is at an institution that has a long-standing, well-established archive. And then another speaker's at a place somewhere in between. So I hope we have something for everybody, no matter where your archives falls on that spectrum. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce everyone to Sarah Kuntz, our state archivist. She would like to extend a quick welcome to everyone as well. And she'll tell us a little bit more about the TAP program and what led us to create this webinar. So Sarah, whenever you're ready, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. Everyone can hear me? Someone who's on screen, yes. Give me a thumbs up. Okay, good. I always like to check, a little audio check. As Brooke said, welcome everyone. I'm the state archivist, Sarah Kuntz, and just a little bit about the Traveling Archivist Program. So this is a program that was started many years ago by the State Historical Records Advisory Board, which is a board appointed by the governor's office. It's founded in state statute. Many states and territories also have SHRABs. And the goal of these SHRABs is to work across the state on projects and techniques that will further the preservation of and access to historical records across their state. And every state kind of does their own little flavor of how they want to undertake those activities. And one technique that the plan that the North Carolina has undertaken has been to develop the Traveling Archivist Program. And this year, the TAP activities are actually funded by a grant from the National Historical Publications and Records Commission, which is the granting arm of the National Archives. And the TAP has done a number of different things over the years. We often make visits now virtually. In the COVID environment, we can do it virtually, but also in person to come to your site and advise on particular matters about archives, maybe give some tips and techniques. TAP program has also developed training over the years. That's been a more current thing. We've worked in conjunction with the North Carolina Digital Heritage Center in Chapel Hill to help foster digitization of collections from local repositories. So you kind of get the drift. We're all about trying to help you do what you need to do to preserve your collections and make them accessible. In this case, use your collections to promote what you're doing and maybe further the work of your own institutional archives. And in this round, our TAP visits had a number of community college archives participating. And when we started hearing kind of the same needs for training, we thought it would be a good idea to not just limit that training to a couple of places, but open it up to the larger community. So hence the origination of this workshop today and the subsequent one next week. So with that, I will stop talking and turn it over to the experts. I just wanted to welcome everyone. And I look forward to hearing from our speakers and any questions that you might have at the end of our program. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. So glad to have you with us today. All right. Well, without further ado, let's talk Promoting Your Collections. I'm thrilled to introduce our three speakers today. First, we're going to hear from Isabel Folk. She is the Archive and Cataloging Librarian at Rowan Cambarras Community College in Salisbury. She currently serves as Secretary for the Society of North Carolina Archivists. Today, she's going to discuss her experience in growing an outreach program while also growing a young archives in the community college environment. Next, we'll hear from Erin Alsop. She is the archivist for Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte. She's also the co-founder of the North Carolina Community College Archives Association. Erin will speak about promotion through collections development and instruction and larger levels of advocacy for archives. And to wrap up our program, we'll hear from Erin Larimore. She has served as University Archivist at UNC Greensboro since 2011. She currently serves as University Archives representative on the board of the North Carolina Community College Archives Association. She's been an active member of the Society of American Archivists since 2001 and has served as on the organization's council from 2016 to 2019. She's going to share some tips and examples from her experience in the university system that should translate well to the community colleges. And just as some bookkeeping here, I guess, if you have a question during the presentation, please feel free to type it in the chat box or the Q&A box. As we go, I'll be monitoring those so our presenters can focus on their presentations, but we'll try to answer some questions as we go, or depending on time, we may answer those at the end. We'll see how things go throughout the session. All right, well, to start things off then, Isabel, I will turn it over to you. Whenever you're ready, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen because I know you've got some slides to share as well.
Yes. All right. Just hang on one second.
Here we go.
Okay, so as Brooke mentioned, I will be talking today about sort of growing outreach as you are also growing a brand new archive. So just kind of give you a little bit of a brief history of where this whole thing started. So I was hired in September of 2019. So the official birth date, if you will, of the actual fully realized archive services at Rowan Cambarras started the day I started in September 2019. So I was their very first archivist. There was some material already in place. There was probably something along the lines of maybe 30 linear feet already in the space. And we're going to see a picture of the space as it was my first week there. So there was some material already there. There was a basic Excel spreadsheet inventory already had been done. Partial policies were in place. Those had to get tightened up and sent off to council. And we just got word like last Friday that council finally signed off on the policies. They've had other things on their mind for the last year and a half, and they hadn't gotten around to just signing off on the policies, but that's finally done. But there were also several obstacles that I ran into, and I was sort of aware of going in because I knew this was a brand new archive when I started. There was really no staff or faculty awareness. Nobody knew that the archives existed. Nobody, because it didn't until September of 2019. Nobody really knew what was in there. Staff and faculty are already very used to going to the library for answers to their questions. So now we just nudge them slightly to the left or to the right and say, hey, you know, we don't have this in the library, but we have a librarian who's also an archivist. And if you just email her and we'll forward your email, she can help you because she's the archivist and she actually probably has those records. So they don't know the archives is there, but they're already used to going to the library. There was no active outreach in place because, again, brand new archives. And a lot of the users, the staff, the faculty, and the students have no experience using an archive. They don't know it exists, they don't know it's there, and they have absolutely no idea how to use it, even if they did know it was there. There's also no social media access for me, not really. So Rowan Cabarrus keeps its social media very locked down. They have the official social media, Rowan Cabarrus social media site, and that is it. No one else is allowed to, like the library cannot have its own social media account. So that's kind of restricted us a little bit in what kind of promotion we can do and what kind of outreach we can do, because they don't let us have direct control over that. We do, however, have a very good relationship with the woman who's in charge of that account. So I do recommend that if you are in the same position of having your institution have a very locked down social media presence, find whoever is in charge of it and become very good friends with them, because they are much more likely to promote your stuff if they already like you. And the last obstacle I faced is one that still really hasn't been answered, is, am I a records manager? Because when I started, it occurred that really nobody had bothered to kind of Google what an archivist does. And they assumed that I was going to be taking care of the private school records that, you know, are part of the records retention schedule. And I said, well, I'm an archivist, and that's not really part of it, but if you want me to be a records manager, I can. So they're still trying to figure out whether or not they actually want me to be a records manager, because they're very nervous about giving up physical access or physical control of their records. So that's still being discussed on and off, because again, last year and a half, they've had lots of other things on their minds and they haven't really gotten around to answering that question. So this is a picture of what the archives look like my first week. What you don't see is behind me, there's about 7 or 8 more filing cabinets. Fortunately, they were all empty. All of the filing cabinets have been emptied and put into boxes and inventoried and put up on the shelves. But there was a lot of stuff in the archive because the room had been sort of empty for at least 5 years. And so it had turned into sort of a storage space where everyone just put stuff they didn't want to deal with. So it took a little while to get all of that stuff out. But when I started, there was just a lot of junk in the room. So our current outreach initiatives, the Rowan Cabarrus Library puts out a newsletter 3 times a year, essentially one for each term, spring, fall, and summer. And I've started doing sort of a column, if it's long enough to be a column. Sometimes it's just a blurb because I don't have much to say, called Archives Corner. And I do it to promote collections. You can see in this picture that I was promoting 2 of our new collections, yearbooks and catalogs. Usually it is just, hey, I finished a collection and here's what it is, and here's the link to it, and here's what's in it. Sometimes it's more general housekeeping stuff. For instance, when we got our new photograph scanner, I was really excited about it. And so that went into Archives Corner. I did a digital exhibit this summer, and that's going to be, I timed it perfectly and finished it right after the summer newsletter went out. So it's going to be in the fall newsletter because I didn't think about the timing on that. But it's purely for promotion and outreach. We also do a summer institute every year for Rowan Cabarrus, where staff and faculty get together and just sort of update everyone else on what we've been doing and what is coming up. I have done 2 summer institute presentations, 2020 and 2021, all about the archives, which has really helped raise awareness. The last presentation I gave at Summer Institute had something north of 50 people in it. So there were plenty of people who by the end of that hour knew everything that I knew about the archives, and were full of questions and wondering what was there and how do they use it and how can they get access. So that was really exciting. And then the other thing I've been doing is just directly emailing key offices. So the registrar and academic programs are the 2 who hold most of the catalogs. And I've gotten most of the catalogs, but there are still some floating around out there. And so I've been in contact with the registrar and academic programs to sort of get some of their records. I did receive an email just a couple months ago from somebody in one of our programming offices who was looking for fact books from 2005, and I was like, oh, I have those. And if you have any past that, I'll take them. So it's very much a give and take, where if they need something that they just simply don't have on file, I provide that to them, and then I ask them, hey, do you have anything you can give to me? Because I would absolutely love to take some of your public records. We also did the first digital exhibit that I mentioned. This was the Facebook post that our social media person put out when I digitized. This is a book, sort of a book, it's maybe 20 pages of hand-drawn sketches that a guy did for a historical series they were doing back in the 60s. And a very famous newspaper columnist, or at least locally famous newspaper columnist, did historical essays to go with each of the sketches. So I digitized all of the sketches and put them up on our website or in one of our LibGuides, and our social media person was very happy to promote that for us. Again, we couldn't do it ourselves because we don't have access, but our social media person is very, very nice, and we sent it to her with a little descriptive blurb, and she popped it up on Facebook, and I emailed all the history professors, and they were all very excited. So we do have plans in place going forward. This is what the archives looks like now, with all of the stuff pulled out, with the exception of a couple of chairs that they just haven't gotten around to moving out yet. We have a 3-year program plan in place. We hammered that out this summer, and essentially what that program plan was for each part of the library, what are their plans for the next 3 years. And one of the areas that we focused on was the archives. And the biggest thing we decided for that 3-year program plan was we are going to do 2 exhibits a year directly related to the archives. One of them is going to be digital, and hopefully one of them will be an exhibit paired with some kind of presentation, hopefully by one of the history professors, or just a faculty member giving a presentation to whoever shows up. So that is in our plans for the next 3 years, just to kind of get us into the rhythm of putting out exhibits at least twice a year. We are also going to add the archive to our library orientation classes. We are going to be back in person starting next week for the most part. So we will be updating our library orientation classes a little bit, and we will be adding archive services into that, just to let students and faculty know, hey, we are here and we might be useful. We have almost hired an archives assistant. We finished up interviews just a couple weeks ago, and we are waiting for that to all pass through HR. So that is almost in place. It's a full-time, but they will be splitting their time between being an admin for the archives and being an admin just for the library in general. So this person won't be mined all the time, but they will be mine hopefully at least 50% of the time, to just kind of help me with all of the extra stuff that comes along with being an archivist. I am planning on continuing doing Archives Corner 3 times a year as much as I can, and I think it's always on the front page of the newsletter, which is usually only 2 pages anyway, but it's usually right there in the upper left-hand corner, very first thing you see when you open up the newsletter. We're going to continue Summer Institute, and we are looking at a possible renovation of this space. So there is a mystery leak in my archive that we cannot find. It just sort of appears every now and again. It's coming out from underneath the wall, and we don't know where it's coming from. So we're trying to figure that out, and there is enough room, because it is rather a large room, as you can see in this picture, where we can install new shelving. And so we're kind of trying to get all of that moving. We have plans to start digitizing all of our photographs, because photographs are always a crowd pleaser. So we do have a lot of things sort of moving right now moving slowly because we're still sort of crawling out of the pandemic, but we have put things in place to kind of, we have a plan moving forward. We have a path that we can take. All right, and that is growing a new archive and growing outreach initiatives at the same time.
Great, thank you, Isabel. This sounded fantastic, and I'm glad to hear how you folks are moving, your plans for the future. It sounds exciting. We did have one question come in the chat while you were talking. Adrian asks, what's the audience for the Summer Institute that you'd mentioned? Is it faculty and students?
It is faculty and staff.
Staff, okay.
Yeah, so it is no students. It actually takes place right after spring semester ends. It's like the week it ends, the week after it ends. So it's pretty much it's faculty and staff.
Great, okay. Well, and I also had a question as you were speaking, because you mentioned the exhibits you're working on and the programming that you're hoping to partner with a faculty member. And this may be too big of a question to ask, but how do you build those relationships with the faculty who might be a good fit for that sort of thing?
So I wear a lot of hats. I'm not just the archive and cataloging librarian. I also work as a liaison between the library and some of the faculty. We all do, all of the librarians. Yeah. So I actually have something of a relationship with some of the history faculty. We have pretty good relationships with all the English faculty. So the people that I don't know, the other librarians definitely do. And there are librarians who have much longer tenures than I do. And so they have managed to build up really, really great relationships with a lot of our faculty. So for that, I rely pretty heavily on my fellow librarians, just because, again, we've been out for the last year and a half.
Right.
I haven't really had a chance to really build relationships very much beyond, occasional emails. So yeah, a lot of the librarians who have been there for much longer than I have know a lot of these people. They know, what their interests are, and the library is really active. And so a lot of the faculty love doing whatever they can to help the library, because we do provide so many services for their students.
Yeah, well, that sounds great that you've got those resources and those other librarians.
Yes.
We did have one other question come in, and I'm hoping we can get to it quickly, and then we'll turn things over to Erin also. But what do you, Mary Ann asks, what do you do about copyright permissions for the digitization?
So right now we technically own everything anyway, because everything that I have in my archive comes from Rowan Cabarrus. We haven't had any personal donations yet. So all of the copyright belongs to us automatically because it's stuff that we created. And I also have the absolute vaguest copyright disclaimer on everything that I put into the archive, which is, this does have copyright on it. The user is responsible for all copyright compliance, which is not, it's as vague as I could make it while still making it good. So I assume that if anything goes wrong, I'll hear from legal. But yeah, it's something that we have discussed, but right now we have we own all the copyright because it's already ours.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Isabel. Erin, if you are ready, I'll let you take it away.
Sure. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can you see this all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks everyone. Isabel, that was a really great segue into what I'm about to discuss. Sorry, let me just minimize that. Into what I'm about to discuss. So really, what I'll be sharing about is my experience with advocating for archives through instruction, collection development, and conversation. So just some background, the Central Piedmont Archives, at least in terms of collecting, started in the late 1960s by a man named Raymond Mason, who's seen here in the middle. You can see his little tape recorder near his feet. And he was an automotive instructor with the Central Industrial Education Center, which was one of the institutions that was a precursor to the forming of Central Piedmont. And he understood, I guess he was ahead of his time, at least in terms of establishing an archive. And he and his secretary would create scrapbooks. So we have about 38 or so scrapbooks just of news clippings. That's essentially a 40-year history of Carver and Mecklenburg colleges, the Central Industrial Education Center, and the beginnings of Central Piedmont. And he also saved brochures and publications, photographs, and even recorded oral history interviews. And that's the equipment that he used below. And what he did was create a history room in the library. So he enabled people to come and access these resources and talk about the history of the college and the history of the community. And he really established this, really nice location to, come together over the love of history, right? But he passed suddenly. And so as a result of that, people didn't know what to do at the time, because he was really the only person and all of the inventory was in his head for the most part. So the librarians in the early 80s kind of cataloged everything and assessed them. Thank goodness they did not throw it away. But over the course of like 30 or so years, it kind of sat in a variety of places, and various library staff and state archives personnel came to assess and kind of monitor the catalog essentially, but really nothing was ever done with it until 2013, when the college celebrated its 50th anniversary and they hired their first archivist, Katie Howell. And she, really laid the groundwork for the modern day archives, at least in terms of establishing the record groups and things that we probably would still be doing today, because she was there for at least a few years before I got there. So that's some background, and then I'll jump into what is advocacy. You can say in a way that Raymond Mason was advocating. All the various people in a way that have helped the archives over the years were advocating for the preservation of the history of our institution. And this is just a simple definition. Advocacy is public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. And I like to think of those who have come before me, and even the work we do today, is a form of advocacy, because we're not just preserving it, but through other initiatives, we're making people aware. So instruction is one of the ways that we advocate for the use of archives, especially. And we have a really great instruction team at our library, and they've been really kind to, kind of take us under their wing and, become more involved in instruction opportunities. Granted, the COVID environment has put a wrench in those plans a little bit because we've had to switch gears. But aside from that, we are still making good progress. So generally what's covered in these instruction sessions would just be an overview of primary and secondary resources and how to navigate databases. We've taken more of the focus on primary resources and utilizing archives as a whole. And that could be anything from the state archives, from the national archives, wherever it may be. And just kind of shining this light on the use of archival materials overall, as opposed to just Central Piedmont, is what we're kind of pushing towards, at least in certain instances. And then, eventually when we move into our new space, which I'll explain later on in the presentation, we'll have a more inviting reading room and a shared instruction space where we hopefully can have, people having students having classes or visiting the reading room and participating in this, in-person opportunity to have a better understanding of not just how to find them online, but how to have these interactions in an archival setting. So these are just some examples of the various instruction opportunities that we have ongoing right now, or things that we've done in the past, and some things to come. So the Charlotte Racial Justice Consortium is a consortium of 6 institutions within Mecklenburg County, and the students are selected. Students that are selected have to research their institution's racial history and present their findings, host healing circles as a way to, talk about the past and overcome pain and things that have happened. And, obviously we can't change the past, but this is an opportunity to have a better reflection on the true stories of, what really happened. And so we got involved to, provide students with access to our institutional materials. And I'll explain the various tools in which we had to do that. But I've provided the link here if anyone wants to see the research guide. The then and now assignment and the timeline activity, these are mainly for history classes where We're teaching students how to locate and navigate database systems to find primary and secondary resources, and really showing the evolution of a movement or a situation over time. That's really the purpose of these two assignments here. The Legacy series is an archival revival. They're not necessarily research assignments, but they are really unique projects that get students to know that there is an archive. That's one of the major points of those particular projects. So the Legacy series, we partnered with the Journalism 110 class, and for their interview final assignment, they interview retirees of the college and collect their stories and learn about the history simultaneously. And then their projects are then added into the archive repository. Archival Revival is actually a creative writing class. And what we have the students do is just select one image from the archive, and they write a creative writing piece. And again, these two, there's LibGuides for both of them here if you guys want to see the works. Archival Revival is something that we've been doing for about 4 or 5 semesters now, and it's been really great. And then we just got involved with the History Club, so I don't have much to give on that just yet, but we'll see. Oops, sorry, I'm just trying to, oh, sorry, hold on one second. I'm having some difficulties. Here we go. I just want to move this. Can you see that? Sorry. All right, there we go. Sorry, that was distracting. So here's our, let me just go back. Sorry, I did not foresee this happening. Brooke, I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries.
Okay,
it happens to all of us.
Lose my space. Okay, I'm good. Whew, I'm back. So here's the LibGuide for the CRJC. Just wanted to show you kind of an overview of the information provided if you haven't already accessed the link. So we give an overview of what are archives, what some terminology to include, because one thing that which all of us can relate to. Many of community college archive students this is their first time going to an institution outside of high school, whatever it may be, and they have very, very basic research experience at this point anyway. So we're just really taking a step back and going with the very basics. What is an archive? What do you understand about it? And then how to read a finding aid, things of that nature. So previously I had mentioned one of the tools in which we provided access to our resources for the Charlotte Racial Justice Consortium. And it's because we only just got a database at least working and accessible about 3 or 4 months ago. This was a project that happened last year. And so we had to use Google Drive to give them access to things because we didn't have an appropriate system that they could access. And, so obviously they didn't get a true research experience because we were creating the folder structure, the box structure for them and things like that. But it really came in handy, especially because all of our interactions were virtual. So this gave them, we got to sit down together and really work on how to navigate these boxes and how to analyze the sources provided in this setting. And this was just one of, I think maybe about 4 or 5 collections that we provided access to. So not ideal, but it got us by. So the Digital Heritage Center, I mentioned the scrapbooks early on that Raymond Mason created. This is the front cover of the very first one. And this is something that this has been a great resource for the CRJC students because it does have a lot of documented history about Carver College and Mecklenburg College, which is really what they were hoping to learn more about in a condensed setting. So not having to go to, multiple different resources. And the Digital Heritage Center had scanned this and quite a few other things for us. And, we're so grateful that we had this because with this information in their database, we were able to give the students at least a virtual opportunity to show them what an archival database looks like. So now we do have Content DM now, and I just wanted to kind of show you, this is, this was a long time coming. Even before I started, it was advocated time and again that we needed some sort of database system. So happy to say that we do have it now. This is really all we have uploaded at this point. So more to come on that. So again, just an overview of the timeline activity. And I know I mentioned it before, but really one big takeaway for really with any instruction opportunity that we have is, we're trying to humanize the past in many ways. They often say history is written by the victors, but I feel like in archives, the stories of the underdogs are hidden, but they can be uncovered and found. And through that humanizing of the past through archives, you're able to have an understanding of why things happened the way they did and get a different perspective on things. So this is something that, we're hoping continues on. So the next part of advocacy, I guess, or the way to advocate is through collection development. So what I started doing when I first began was, assessing the current collections that we have processed, and the materials, even if they're not processed, just getting a better grasp on what we have. So, we have publications, catalogs, photographs, and we've developed reference material from a lot of our sources, like a timeline document, for example, and then the reprocessing of materials. So there's a book written on the first 30 years of the college's history, and we have the audio cassette tapes, and we have the transcripts, and we've been migrating these cassette tapes with the little recorder that we had found online, and the process was great, but what we uncovered was that the tapes are way more detailed than the transcripts are, and part of it is a problem to us because certain voices were left out, and you can tell that perhaps it was intentional, or perhaps it was just severe editing on the author's part. I'm not really sure. We don't have those answers. But one thing that we are doing now is for the next CRJC consortium, we're hoping that the students can have more of a capstone project towards the end where they could report their findings on these tapes, perhaps, rewrite some of the story anyway, and curate an exhibition out of it. Secondly, based on, okay, so what we have in our collections, but what are we missing? I discovered that we do not really have anything at all related to LGBTQ plus and history. We do have a Pride Alliance organization, and we've since started at least collecting some of their materials, but really, with the amount of stuff that we have, there really is no mention of anything related to LGBTQ plus rights, movements, students. I mean, so that was a problem, and something that we're now collecting as a way to have their voices preserved as well. We're also collecting student and faculty work. So through these collaborative instruction opportunities, that's kind of something that we're trying to do as well. And then oral history programs, so a lot in flux, but then also connecting these collections with places outside of the library. So college programs, dental hygiene and nursing. Those are two of the oldest running programs at the college. And so we bring materials out, let people know that they exist, if they have anniversaries and things like that. We've gotten involved with some historical displays, connecting with the alumni and retirees group. So people that, are retiring, we always, send a message out to say, hey, if you want to contribute to the history of the college, let's talk more, that type of thing. So the history club and local businesses, this is still in flux, but we have combined efforts with our institutional history club. So we'll see what happens there. And then even other institutions in your area. I mean, we've been fortunate, I know UNC Greensboro is far from us, but they've been a really great partner, in just promoting, what we are trying to do for the community college archives, right? The State Archives is obviously a huge supporter of our efforts too, and a great partner in that. So really just assess all these things around you, find what's missing, and discover ways to connect it and think outside the box. And then lastly, advocacy through conversation. So if you had an elevator pitch, if you were in the elevator or something with the president of your institution, what would you say about the archive? Think about that quick 2-minute pitch, and then build on that. Some other ideas that stimulate conversation anyway are social media. So we have a good relationship with our social media manager for Throwback Thursday posts, and that's been really successful over the past 1.5 years or so. We've been approached by human resources to get involved in new employee orientation. So adding an institutional heritage component to their 4 or 5 hour orientation session. And then exhibits, we have a few display cases, throughout the central campus, because Central Piedmont has about 6 campuses throughout Mecklenburg County. So one thing we're, talking about now is, bringing these exhibits to other campuses. So working with partners, at the college to make sure that we're having this one college mindset, and that everyone at all the area campuses can see what is happening, and not just on Central. So this is, I know the picture is blurry, I apologize, but I had mentioned that we are moving into a new space early next year. So this is the new library and student success center. And funny enough, the archives they're just on the other side, you know, of the building, but we do have a lot of glass. And for whatever reason, you know, they you know, we're denying every request that I had to not have as much glass in the new space, but I did make sure, you know, UV filters and all of these other things are contributed. So that was what. And then lastly, some words of wisdom. You know, find your allies. I think Isabel had mentioned something about that earlier in her presentation. You know, not everyone is going to understand what we do or why it's important, but that shouldn't deter us from our efforts to make archives more accessible, archives, you know, more aware within our community college settings, within our institutional settings, and even, you know, in our day-to-day. I mean, if you're interested in history, share something about an archive, right? You know, odds are if you can teach someone new about the world of archives, collections, materials, you know, anything like that, you know, you've accomplished something. So, you know, but then lastly too, if you don't have the funds for databases or software or anything like that, you know, the Digital Heritage Center and the State Archives, you know, are great resources, even questions, you know, on how to, you know, do the day-to-day. I mean, reach out to any one of us on the panel. You know, we'll be happy to help you out. So I think that's all I have. And I will stop sharing now. And thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That was great and a lot of really interesting and valuable information. I too was noticing the theme of find the partners who can help you. That seems to be a really helpful thing to do. Okay, just in the interest of time, I think we will jump straight to Erin Laramore's presentation. If you're ready, Erin. And then that way we should still have some time for questions at the end.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm going to run through a few tips and tricks that have come in handy for us at UNC Greensboro in listening to Isabel and Erin talk. Like literally everything they talked about are things that I've also struggled with and worked to build at UNC Greensboro. You know, including instruction, outreach, everything like that. And so these are just a few things that have come in handy for us that I think might be something that could be replicated in the community college setting, but also just to reiterate what Erin also threw out there at the end, you know, there are allies who are happy to help you in the profession. So if you have questions, you know, never fear to just shoot someone an email. Archivists are nice people for the most part. So, you know, we're always happy to help. But I want to talk a little bit more about social media. Both Isabel and Erin have touched on this already. One of the tricks that I found when I got to UNC Greensboro was that there were these social media profile, like there was a Facebook page floating around that was this weird, like invitation only page set up for an imaginary person who stood in for the archives. It's very odd. So step one is to find out what in the world you already might have, even if you didn't set it up. That's a question of asking people, especially people who've been around for a while. Even if they didn't manage something, they might know that something existed. And see if you can find the login information for these accounts, or at least find out who might have created them. We actually have created with our new social media platforms that reach across Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We created a Google Sheet that we share within our department just so that we all know what we have and what the login information is, so that we don't return to a situation where if I were to leave UNCG in 2 years, no one would know how to access the Facebook page. Also inventory what your college has and who controls that. And as Isabel and Erin were saying, make friends with that person. They have a lot of power. And they also can tell you what platforms work best for your audience. You know, the person who controls the campus social media knows what works and what doesn't. Their job is to know that. And they can tell you how much, you know, time something's going to take and how much interaction you should be able to expect. And honestly, again, what works for them. You can piggyback off of what's already there, or you can partner in terms of what's already there. But it's important to keep in mind how much time you have to dedicate to this too, because it does take time. And I'll talk a little bit about how you can repurpose things for social media, but don't spread yourself too thin. It's better to concentrate in one key area that would work versus spreading yourself across every social media platform whenever something new pops up. Also, if you are able to create your own social media for the archives, and I realize that, as Isabel was talking about, you don't always have that opportunity, but, try to be consistent across platforms. If you're setting up a Facebook page and a Twitter account, use the same picture for both of them. Try to get the same name for both of them. It really can kind of help with branding issues. But developing content is often the hardest part with social media. But I tell folks all the time, when you're already doing work, if you're doing instruction work, if you're doing exhibits, if you're making copies for somebody, if you're processing an archival collection, all of these things are really kind of low-hanging fruit. It's an opportunity for you to reuse something that you've already kind of digitized or found or researched for some other purpose. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. It's not like your social media audience is the same as who might have seen an exhibit that you put up. There's no shame in recycling. So save yourself some time, energy. What we do for our content bank at UNCG, again, we have a shared drive, and we will just put copies of images that we've digitized or reproduced for classroom instruction. Or honestly, I use my phone all the time. If I'm doing a classroom instruction session and I put out physical materials, I'll snap pictures in the reading room to share that way. The folks on social media aren't coming to do, hardcore research where they need to be able to scan, zoom in on something really tightly. A picture with your phone, assuming you have a smartphone from the last 10 years, is going to be more than sufficient for social media sharing. So, make use of that if you can. We also keep a content calendar, and it's kind of circling around different topics. And some of them are really common topics like Throwback Thursday, where the university helps share our content. Similarly, we partner with the university social media person on things like homecoming, commencement, Founders Day, move in, special events where they kind of do a big social media drive. We at least throw a picture or two up on our account that they can reshare to tie into that. But we also kind of created some of our own social media things like Throwback Thursday. We have a large collection of really awesome looking rare books that are women's detective fiction. So this is detective fiction that's focused on women detectives or was written by women. And if you've ever seen the covers of these types of books from like the 30s, 40s, 50s, they're really awesome pictures. And so we started a Whodunit Wednesday, and we just post a cover of that every Wednesday. And those get used a lot because they are so visually appealing. So again, we're not creating that from scratch. Whenever we create an exhibit or work with a class that's using these materials, that's when we snap the image of the covers. We don't go every Wednesday looking for a cover. We just reuse the ones that we already have for some reason. And finally, if you have people who are willing to help with this, we actually work with a lot of student workers who help us with our social media. One of my pet peeves is folks assuming that just because someone is 19 years old that they're a social media expert, and that's not the case. They're still going to need training, and they certainly aren't going to be an archives expert. But in terms of actually having the time to do this, they can help you out a lot. And so whenever you can, use folks who might be available. A few other things, though, that we do that might be applicable in your setting. We do a lot of pop-up exhibits. These are exhibits that are up for a very short period of time. And when I say short period of time, I'm talking hours, not days. So we actually bought a little card table from Home Depot, an easily foldable table that's probably, 2.5 feet by 2.5 feet. It's not big. It's easy for me to carry. we bought that and a tablecloth, and we will literally go both in the library in a high traffic zone, so around the reference desk, that's our main high traffic zone, or out on campus somewhere. Maybe it's in a building where a lot of students are coming through. We actually set up a pop-up exhibit one time outside of the campus gym to catch people at lunch who are going in and out of the rec center. You know, these are opportunities for folks just to stumble across archives while in the course of their everyday life. We've got a lot of folks who might come find us on purpose, and we've got a lot of folks who we might be able to say, that's a person who could be my friend, my advocate. I need to go talk to them. But you never know when, like, the head, this is an example for me. We have our joint school of, let's see, what is it? Joint School of Nanobiology and Technology. It's a sciencey thing. The Joint School of Nanotech. The dean there, she happened to learn about us and was really intrigued by archives and learning about history of the history of our institution. And I never would have thought that a nanotech person would be really excited about archives, but she just stumbled across us when we were doing one of these events. And it's, you know, a really good opportunity to kind of start a conversation and to just build on foot traffic, to go where people are, as opposed to waiting for or advocating for people to come to you. We use a lot of duplicates when we do this, or reproductions. We'll print out a photo and just mount it on a little piece of board so that we can take it with us. Or we have multiple copies of our yearbooks and they've been digitized, so we take the third copy with us to these so that people can actually, at least in normal non-COVID-y times, touch the materials, which is a really good way of engaging people. So we even do this at one of the local breweries. We have an event called Hop Into History, where we take our archives out into the local community. And we do this in partnership often with other institutions. So the pictures you see here are actually both when we partnered with our friends at Wake Forest on a Hop Into History event. And so, you know, that's a fun opportunity, again, to reach people in the local community where they are and to talk about your archives. There are also a lot of really cool, free and easy to use storytelling tools that don't cost any money, aren't that hard to learn, and can really enhance your social media posts, exhibits you might be creating, your website, the university's website. Could be used in classes. I use both of the things I'm going to talk about here in an undergraduate class and a graduate class that I teach. So the tools I want to mention are from a journalism school at Northwestern. It's called Night Lab tools. They're created for journalists to use, but honestly, they're just really cool digital storytelling tools that allow you to kind of use pictures that you might already have digitized, or pull in a YouTube video that might be up. You can pull from a wide variety of media sources to do really cool things. One of the things I really like is juxtapose. It literally, you have two photographs of the same place, an old photo, a new photo, and you see a little bar in the middle. It's a slider bar. And so the person can actually interact with it and slide back and forth and see old versus new. All you have to do for that is have a URL for both of the images, and that's it. You go to the Juxtapose.js website, which I'll go back, is right there, juxtapose.nightlabs.com, or you could just Google Juxtapose.js. And it gives you a little bit of JavaScript that you can embed on any kind of website or anywhere that you need to. It's a really fun and interactive way. Folks, I think it was Isabel who mentioned how much folks like photos. And so it's a good opportunity to make the photos even a little bit more engaging if you can. And we also use Timeline.js, which is also from Night Lab. It actually runs off of Google Sheets. And so if you know how to use Google Sheets or Excel, you could do this. We created a timeline of all of our university presidents. It looks really neat. So you can see the slider bar at the bottom that allows somebody to interact with the timeline that way. Or using the little arrows that are up near the top, you can scroll from one to the next. Again, if you're creating an exhibit already, if you've got this content already, reuse it. It's a way to make it last. And this is what the Google Sheet looks like. It's you download the Google Sheet from the Timeline.js website, and you just fill it in. And each of the little headers even has a little explanatory text piece that pops up when you hover over it, so you won't get confused. And then you just add that to your to the Timeline.js website, and you're good. It's an easy to use program. I think it looks really nice. It gives you something really cool that honestly marketing folks love, because it's, again, journalism heavy. So just some opportunities for folks. With that, I will throw it back over to Brooke.
Thank you. This was amazing. I know I was furiously scribbling notes for myself from everyone's presentation.
Sorry if I talk too fast. I don't want to keep people too
No,
late.
no. Well, and we're coming up on the hour anyway. So I would like to give a chance for our participants today to ask any other questions. Feel free to drop those in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that. I also do want to take a moment to share, if you aren't already signed up for our session next week, we're going to be talking about creating policies in the community college archives environment. Aaron Alsop and Aaron Larimore are going to join us on that one as well. So that's, let's see, that's Thursday, August 19th at 10 a.m. So we'd love to have folks join us there. So let's see, does anyone have any questions for our speakers today? I know they've provided tons of great information and some inspiration too. I'm thinking of things that we can do on our end, even beyond the community colleges. All right. I'm seeing some comments now. Carol says, fabulous ideas and information. Thank you. Will you make the PowerPoint available? Asked Tammy. We do have this recording, so I will be sending an email to everyone, hopefully by tomorrow, with a link to the recording. I can also include slides if our speakers are okay with that, and it looks like they are. I will also send some links to everyone, and actually I'm going to drop some in the chat now, just so you have them. There's a link to register for that for the next webinar that I just mentioned. And I'm realizing now that text is August 18th, but it's the 19th. It's Thursday at 10, just next week. So just make sure you're aware of that. But I'll send that in the email as well. And I'll also probably include a very short survey evaluation, because we'd love to hear from our participants today, find out what else we could provide for you. And we'd love to hear how you felt about the program itself today. Let's see. We have just a couple more minutes if anyone. And Tammy says this is really good information. We have weird scrapbooks full of newspaper clippings. I'm sure a lot of folks do too. Aaron Larimore, I did have a question about, I think it was your Hop into History photos. Did I see swag at the end of the table? Some buttons or postcards?
Back in about 5 years ago, the university celebrated its 125th anniversary. And as part of that, I was lucky enough to get a little bit of money from our chancellor. And one of the things we bought with that, we purposefully thought of what can we buy that we can repurpose after this. Yeah. One of the things that we bought instead of buying pre-made buttons was a button maker. And so we reuse that frequently now. Yeah, so we bought things that we knew we would be able to continue using for swag. Yeah, people like free stuff.
For sure.
So, anytime you got free stuff you can give out, whether it's food or buttons or, we laugh all the time because we had to convince folks in the library that maybe giving away bookmarks every day wasn't the only thing you could do. Library folks love to give away bookmarks, but yeah, no, we bought a cheap button maker off of Amazon. We didn't exactly go out looking for quality button makers. I want to say it was maybe about $150 plus. Of course, you have to buy the metal backing and the plastic thing that goes on top of it. And it came with this fun little thing that crunches, cuts the paper into the proper size circle. So, It's fun to do arts and crafts on a Friday afternoon when your brain's not working anymore too. It's kind of like when you stand by the photocopier for an hour or so. So it's, it's one of those things where, again, it takes time, but, it's a fun thing to have. And if you make too many buttons, 9 times out of 10, you can reuse them for the next event.
Yeah, it's so smart to think about getting that button maker rather than just ordering buttons. Yeah, someone did ask where you got that button maker, but Amazon seems like the easy way to do it. We'll do one last question. I see Adrienne asks, what types of items besides yearbooks have worked well to engage audiences in exhibits? And I suppose that can go to any of our panelists today. Does anyone want to chime in?
I was really excited about the sketches of Old Rowan because it is, I mean, we are in Rowan County, at least half of us, half of our college is in Rowan County. And, most of our students are locals. So that I think was a really, really good thing to do because all of these buildings, for the most part, still exist somewhere. There was one that's like, oh, here's the law office that Andrew Jackson studied in when he wasn't busy gambling, drinking, and fighting people. That's literally what it says in the essay. Is when he wasn't doing all the other things and got around to practicing law, that's where he was practicing. That doesn't exist anymore, but they rebuilt it so that the rebuilt one still exists. So in one form or another, most of these buildings still exist. And so I thought that was a really good thing to show, like, hey, here's what they all looked like back in the 60s or the 50s when these sketches were made.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
we find that a lot of the photos where it's still really visible, where you can tell this is a building that I know, but there is something older in front of it. It works really well. And, we have the luxury of having stuff. UNCG was founded in 1891. So we still have one building on campus that was there then. And so we kind of have that luxury of going way back. But we've also found that when we use pictures like that from the 60s and 70s, especially at events where maybe some retired faculty or former students from that time period are there, they get a real kick out of both seeing campus as it used to be, but also seeing students react to campus as it used to be. So, it's kind of one of those things where it can work in either. Older photos can work in lots of different ways as a good engagement opportunity. We also find that anything people can touch, whether it's a yearbook or honestly a course bulletin, you would think those are very boring, but if you get the opportunity to flip through it, like students love looking at what courses were offered in their department in 1950. They get a kick out of that. And we also have some artifacts that we can use. Old t-shirts, we had class jackets. So things like that. Folks love things that can be touched. But of course, probably not the wisest thing to use at this exact moment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, well, it looks like we're a little after 11 o'clock now. So I think we're gonna put a pause on this, but I would love to thank everyone for joining us today. A special thank you to our panelists who have provided such fascinating and helpful, valuable information. And yeah, so it looks like we've got some folks commenting about how much they enjoyed it as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and close out. But again, thanks everyone for joining us. I hope you'll all join us next week as well for our next session. All right. And if anyone's interested in becoming a TAP recipient for consultations in 2022, keep an eye on our website. I did put a link there as well. We should have an application out in January. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. Take care.
Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, Brooke.